You ever meet someone who swears they don't do feelings, they're calm, distant, a little hard to read, and yet something in their eyes tells you there's more going on? Let me tell you something. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks and grand declarations. Sometimes it slips in quietly, hiding behind small actions, subtle changes, and moments so quick you might miss them if you're not paying attention. And if you've got an avoidant in your life who's acting in certain ways, there's a good chance they're already in love with you, whether they've admitted it or not. Today, we're going to rip the cover off that mystery, dig into the psychology, and help you see the truth that's been right in front of you the whole time. When someone has an avoidant personality style, they usually live by a strict set of unspoken rules. These rules are their safety net, things like keeping emotional distance, not letting anyone get too close, and prioritizing their own independence over relationships. They've built these boundaries over years, often from past experiences that taught them vulnerability is risky. So, they'll make it very clear, through words or behavior, that they value their freedom, their time alone, and their emotional space above all else. But here's the interesting part. When they start breaking those rules, even in small ways, it's rarely by accident. It's a sign that something deep inside of them is shifting. Imagine an avoidant who's always said they hate phone calls, yet suddenly they're picking up when you ring, and not only that, they're staying on the line longer than usual. Maybe they've told you they never do last-minute plans, but one day they're making an exception for you without hesitation. These changes might look small on the surface, but for them, they're monumental. They've trained themselves to stick to certain patterns for protection, so altering them isn't casual. It's intentional, even if they can't consciously admit it yet. You'll notice that they start accommodating you in ways that defy their normal behavior. If they usually avoid texting back quickly, they might respond right away to you. If they're someone who guards their weekends like sacred territory, they might suddenly rearrange their schedule to meet you. These aren't just acts of politeness. They're cracks in the armor they've worn for years. It's their subconscious way of saying, "You matter enough for me to bend the rules I've built my life around." What makes this so powerful is that for an avoidant, these actions go against their instincts. Every fiber of their being tells them to protect their space and maintain control. But love, or even the early stages of deep emotional connection, makes them take risks they normally wouldn't. They start making micro-sacrifices, choosing connection over comfort. Even if they try to play it cool, their actions reveal more than their words ever could. These rule-breaking moments might be rare at first, but they're significant. The avoidant is showing you that you've become an exception to their carefully crafted boundaries. They may not say "I'm in love" out loud, but in a way they already are, because they're acting in ways they've promised themselves they never would. The very fact that they're willing to step outside their comfort zone, even slightly, tells you everything you need to know about how they're starting to feel. They remember the smallest details you share because, for them, those little fragments of information are the safest way to connect without stepping into the vulnerable territory of directly expressing feelings. An avoidant might not tell you outright that you matter, but when they recall the name of your childhood pet, the flavor of ice cream you love, or that random story you told them months ago, it's their quiet way of saying, "I'm paying attention." These details are like breadcrumbs that lead you back to the truth. They care more than they want to admit. This is important because avoidants usually keep emotional distance as a form of self-protection. They prefer to stay on safe ground, avoiding deep emotional waters. So, when they store away your quirks, preferences, and offhand remarks, they're breaking their own pattern in a subtle but deeply meaningful way. It's not just about having a good memory. They're deliberately choosing to keep pieces of you with them, almost as if these memories become a safe form of intimacy without the pressure of physical closeness or verbal confessions. When they bring these details up later, it can feel almost casual, but the timing often gives them away. Maybe you mentioned once that rainy days make you nostalgic, and the next time it's pouring, They send you a photo of the view from their window, saying it reminded them of you. Or perhaps you casually said you love a certain coffee shop, and weeks later, they suggest meeting there. These aren't random coincidences, they're calculated, intentional moves that allow them to show they value you while keeping their emotional cards close to their chest. Avoidants fear that showing too much affection will make them lose control, so remembering these details becomes their safe middle ground. They can express attachment without risking the rejection or exposure they dread. It's also worth noticing that this kind of memory isn't just about facts, it's about emotional resonance. They might not recall every practical thing you told them, but they'll remember anything that connects to an emotional moment you shared. This is because those moments bypass their logical defenses. Even if they try to keep love at bay, emotions have a way of seeping in through the cracks, and these details are proof of that seepage. When you understand this, you realize that for an avoidant, remembering is a form of loving. They may never say, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about you," but their ability to bring up something small and personal is the emotional equivalent. It's the invisible thread they use to keep you close, even when their fear of closeness tries to push you away. They remember not just because it's nice, but because remembering is the safest way they know how to hold onto you without admitting they're already in deep. They let their guard down, even briefly. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, vulnerability is like standing in the middle of a crowded room without armor. They're used to keeping their emotions locked away, shielded from judgment, rejection, or dependency. This isn't because they don't feel, quite the opposite. They feel deeply, but those feelings are often tucked into hidden corners of their heart where no one can reach them. Years of self-protection have built invisible walls, and stepping outside of those walls is not something they do lightly. So, when you notice an avoidant sharing something personal, even for a moment, you're witnessing a rare crack in the fortress. This is not just casual conversation, it's a test, a signal, and sometimes an unconscious confession that you've earned a level of trust they don't give away easily. When an avoidant lets you in, it often happens in subtle ways. Maybe it's late at night, when the world is quiet, and they suddenly tell you about a memory from their childhood. Or maybe it's in the middle of a drive, with the road stretching ahead, and they casually mention a fear or insecurity they've never spoken about before. They don't preface it with, "This is hard for me to say," but the way they glance away, the slight shift in their tone, reveals the truth. This is not something they share with just anyone. For them, vulnerability is risky territory, and the fact they're stepping into it with you means you've begun to feel safe in their mind, even if they won't say it out loud. The key thing to understand is that these moments rarely look dramatic. An avoidant isn't likely to pour out their life story in a sudden flood. Instead, it comes in fragments, a story here, a confession there, a glimpse behind the curtain before it's quickly drawn shut again. You might hear them speak about an old friendship that ended badly, a dream they abandoned, or a time they were hurt by someone they trusted. To an outside observer, these may seem like small disclosures, but in the inner world of an avoidant, they are monumental acts of intimacy. Each piece of truth they share is like a brick removed from the wall they've built around themselves. You'll also notice that these moments of openness often happen when there's no pressure. Avoidants tend to pull back if they feel cornered or interrogated. That's why their guard drops when the setting feels natural and unforced during a walk, while watching a movie, or while doing something side by side where eye contact isn't constant. In those moments, their mind relaxes just enough for their heart to speak. They might even surprise themselves by what they reveal, quickly following it up with a joke or change of subject, as if to cover the emotional slip. But to you, those slips are golden clues. They're the quiet ways an avoidant says, without saying, "I trust you enough to be seen." When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts making space for you in their world, it's not just a casual act, it's a big deal. Avoidants are known for valuing their independence, their routines, and their personal boundaries. They guard their time like it's their most precious resource, and they rarely allow people to disrupt their carefully constructed lives. So, when you notice that an avoidant starts rearranging their schedule, carving out time for you, or inviting you into the spaces they usually keep to themselves, you're seeing something incredibly significant. This is them breaking their own patterns, often without realizing it, because you've started to matter to them in a way they can't ignore. You might see it in small but telling ways. Maybe they work long hours, but they suddenly leave the office early to meet you. Perhaps they're creatures of habit, sticking to their routines religiously, but now they're willing to adjust those routines if it means spending time together. Even something as simple as joining you for an activity they don't typically enjoy can be a sign. For an avoidant, these changes aren't just about being nice. They represent a conscious or subconscious choice to prioritize you over their comfort zone. This is huge because comfort zones are where avoidants feel the safest, and stepping out of them means they're taking an emotional risk. Another way they make space for you is by physically inviting you into their personal world. This could mean welcoming you into their home, introducing you to close friends or family, or sharing parts of their life that are deeply private. Avoidants are not quick to open these doors. Their personal environments are usually their sanctuaries where they can be completely themselves without fear of judgment. Letting you in means they trust you enough to show the unfiltered version of who they are. It's not about the physical space alone, it's about the emotional space they're opening up for you to step into. Making space can also happen in conversations. An avoidant might usually keep topics light, practical, or surface level. But if you notice they're creating opportunities to talk about your life, your dreams, and your struggles, it means they're investing in you emotionally. They might ask questions about how your day went, remember something you said last week, or check in on a challenge you're facing. These aren't just polite exchanges. They're intentional acts of connection. By giving you this attention, they're signaling that you've become a meaningful part of their mental and emotional landscape. It's also worth noticing when an avoidant begins to consider you in their decision making. They might ask your opinion on something important to them, from career moves to personal choices. They could factor in your feelings when making plans or think ahead to include you in events or trips. For someone who's used to making decisions independently, this shift is profound. It shows that your presence matters enough to influence how they shape their life, even in areas where they've previously been entirely self-reliant. In subtle but powerful ways, they also start to anticipate your needs. Without you having to ask, they might adjust plans to accommodate your comfort, remember your preferences, or make an effort to create moments where you feel valued and understood. This level of consideration isn't accidental. It reflects a growing desire to integrate you into their daily life. For an avoidant, making space for you isn't about losing themselves. It's about reshaping their world so that you can exist in it without either of you feeling out of place. And once they've begun doing this, it's a strong indicator that their feelings for you run much deeper than they're letting on. When someone with avoidant tendencies starts to fall for you, one of the clearest and most powerful signs is that they begin making space for you in their world. For an avoidant, their personal space, time, and routine are sacred. It's their safe zone, the structure they've built to feel in control and avoid vulnerability. They often guard it fiercely, keeping others at arm's length to prevent emotional entanglement. But love changes the rules. If you notice that they're slowly shifting their schedule, opening up parts of their life they normally keep private, or rearranging their priorities to include you, it's not an accident. This isn't just convenience or politeness. For an avoidant, making space for you is an act of emotional significance. At first, these changes might be subtle. Maybe they start inviting you to places they normally go alone, like their favorite coffee shop or their weekend jogging route. They could start sending you updates about things happening in their day, not because they need to, but because they want to let you in. They might even adjust their routines, pushing aside a habit or task they've kept consistent for years just so they can see you. For someone who thrives on independence and control over their schedule, these shifts are monumental. It's their way of saying, "You matter enough to disrupt my comfort zone." And they may never say that out loud, but their actions speak volumes. You might also see this in the way they start physically and emotionally creating a place for you. For example, if they invite you into their home, a space they normally guard like a fortress, and actually seem comfortable with you being there, that's a huge step. They might clear a drawer for you, make sure there's your favorite drink in their fridge, or leave something small of yours in their space without asking you to take it back. For someone with avoidant traits, these actions are quiet declarations of trust. They're allowing you into a private, personal part of their life where few people are welcomed. This making space behavior can also show up in the digital world. Maybe they start texting you more consistently, answering calls quickly, or making sure they're available to connect even when they're busy. They might start sharing their thoughts, plans, or even future goals with you, topics they usually keep to themselves. It's not just about giving you physical time. It's about letting you occupy mental and emotional space they usually protect. For an avoidant, mental space is even more guarded than physical space, so this is no small thing. There's also the social side of this transformation. If you start meeting their friends or family, even in casual situations, you can be sure you're being given a place in their inner circle. Avoidants don't typically open that door unless they see you as significant in their lives. It's one thing for them to make time for you in private, but it's another for them to weave you into their social fabric. Whether it's introducing you to their closest friend over dinner or casually mentioning you to someone important in their life, these are moments where they're integrating you into their personal world. Even in their language, you may notice a shift. They might start using words like "we" instead of "I" in certain situations, or they may talk about future plans that naturally include you without asking if you're on board yet. This isn't just about speaking differently, it's about a shift in mindset. It means you're no longer an outsider looking in. You're becoming part of the picture they see for themselves. And for someone with avoidant tendencies, that's an enormous emotional leap, even if they disguise it as casual or unintentional. When someone who's typically avoidant begins to open up about their fears or past pain, it's not a random slip of the tongue, it's a major emotional milestone. Avoidant individuals are experts at keeping emotional walls high and thick. They do this to protect themselves from rejection, disappointment, and vulnerability. Their inner world is a tightly locked vault, and very few people ever get a glimpse of what's inside. So when they start letting you in even a little, it's not because they suddenly lost their sense of self-protection. It's because you've earned a level of trust that most people never reach. This is not about casual chat, or sharing everyday frustrations. It's about revealing pieces of themselves that carry weight, history, and emotional significance. An avoidant will often go through life avoiding situations that could trigger feelings of dependency or intimacy. They'd rather handle problems on their own than risk leaning on someone else. That's why, when they begin to share their fears with you, it's an indicator that they see you differently. They no longer view you as just another person in their orbit. They see you as someone safe. This safety isn't built overnight. It develops over time through consistency, non-judgment, and an unspoken understanding that you won't use their vulnerability against them. When an avoidant talks about their fears, pay attention to the way they deliver their words. Sometimes it's not a dramatic confession, but a small, almost offhand comment. They might talk about feeling insecure in certain social situations, doubting their abilities at work, or worrying about the future. These moments can be subtle, and if you're not tuned in, you might miss the depth of what's happening. To them, every admission is a test, a small opening to see how you respond. Your reaction in these moments determines whether they'll continue to open up or retreat back behind their emotional walls. Opening up about past pain is an even bigger step. For avoidants, the past is often where the roots of their behavior lie, maybe in childhood experiences, previous relationships, or moments where trust was broken. Sharing these stories is risky for them because it means reliving emotions they've worked hard to keep buried. It also means allowing you to see the raw, unpolished version of themselves. This is not the version they show the world. This is the unguarded self that's been hidden for years. When they hand you these pieces of their history, it's because they believe you'll hold them with care. What's fascinating is that an avoidance openness is rarely about seeking pity or reassurance. They're not necessarily asking you to fix anything. Instead, they're letting you stand beside them in a part of their life they usually walk alone. This is intimacy on their terms, not grand romantic gestures, but deep emotional sharing that says, "I trust you enough to see this part of me." For someone who typically fears closeness, this is already a sign of emotional attachment that goes beyond casual interest. Another thing to notice is how they handle the conversation afterward. Avoidants may test the waters, then quickly change the subject if they feel too exposed. They might even downplay what they said as if it wasn't important. But if you've been paying attention, you'll recognize it for what it truly is, a rare moment where they've let their armor drop. These small windows into their inner world don't happen often, and when they do, it's because you've crossed into a territory they reserve only for the people who matter most.